Now, where were we?
Yes, Q&A video. Let's get into it. YouTube has unfortunately taken a page out of Twitter's book, never a good idea, and now have separate display names and user handles. So I'm sorry if I don't call you by your preferred title. Okay, we'll do our queuing at red lights and our A-ing on the move. First, Conrad says, are you a dedicated Triumph Bonneville man, or could you be tempted by a different make of bike? No, I am not a dedicated Bonneville man. I am not dedicated solely to Triumph as a make, nor am I dedicated to the Bonneville or the Modern Classic range, as a model or series of models. The Bonneville family happened to be my favorite standard style motorcycles, retro or otherwise, and at the time that I bought my Speed Twin, a standard motorcycle was the category I was the most interested in. So I picked my favorite one, the Speed Twin. Now that does sort of dovetail into our next question from our buddy Volts, who says, what other Triumph Modern Classic other than the Speed Twin 1200 would you consider buying, especially if it was your only bike? Now that's kind of a loaded question, because I would still say that the Speed Twin, now called the Speed Twin 1200, is my overall favorite Triumph Modern Classic. But if I were doing it again, and it was going to be my only motorcycle, I think I would choose the Scrambler 1200. It has everything I love about this motorcycle, plus a little bit of off-road capability, which is something I've been getting really interested in over the last few years. I think that would make it a better do-it-all bike for me than the Speed Twin 1200 is now. And it would even handle my on-road riding better, because I live in the city and I have to deal with a lot of potholes and speed bumps, and off-roading suspension is great for that. Now the Scrambler 1200 is a little more modern. It gives up some of the retro austerity that I love about my Speed Twin, such as the analog dials and the really tame suite of electronics, and it's also a little bit taller and heavier. It's less handy than the Speed Twin. I have considered here and there trading in the Speed Twin 1200 for a Scrambler 1200, but I don't intend for this to be my only motorcycle forever. I hope to expand my stable, who knows when. Life is expensive. But to answer your question, if I had to have one motorcycle and it had to be a Triumph Modern Classic, Scrambler 1200 all the way. Either the XC or the new X, for the sake of keeping the seat height down. Thomas asks, regarding my Speed Twin, do you regret not getting the red version? No, I don't. Sorry if that disappoints you, but while the red version is gorgeous, I prefer the silver, and I also generally prefer motorcycles that have kind of a neutral or monochrome color palette to them. And that's so that no matter what gear I choose to wear, it never clashes. It's really easy to match it with stuff. I used to have a bright red Honda CBR 600 RR, and I never really liked the way my yellow helmet looked with it. If you have a white, black, or gray helmet though, the red is a great choice. Cottenham, if I'm saying that correctly, asks, do you feel the new exhaust is in keeping with the Bonnie? Yes, actually, I do, and that's for a few reasons. One is, of course, the looks. I know not everybody was a fan of the black silencer with the silver tip that came on the stock first-generation Speed Twin. I could take it or leave it myself, but I love the fact that Akrapovic made a pair of slip-ons that match that look. I could also understand if someone was concerned that putting a louder exhaust on a motorcycle as dignified as a Triumph Bonneville would kind of take away from its character, turn it into something it's not supposed to be. Now we could debate all day about what certain motorcycles are supposed to be, but as for this specific exhaust, these Akrapovic slip-ons paired with a Motone X-pipe, I think that it actually perfectly suits the personality of the Bonneville, specifically the Speed Twin. because while it is dignified in its looks and in around town riding, it could be a really rowdy motorcycle when you get on it. And this new exhaust complements that perfectly. It's very quiet and composed when you're just commuting or touring. But as soon as you want it to make some noise, boy does it. It's also got some nuance to it, you know? It didn't just turn up the decibels with brute force. It adds a lot of texture and character to the sound, as well as, in my opinion, some much needed treble. Excuse me. Alright, I think I can squeak another question in here. Scott says, I'm torn between the Speed Twin and the T120. He asks specifically about the touring ability of those two motorcycles. As I'm sure you know, the Speed Twin, being a derivative of the Thruxton, there's one right there, an old version, it skews a little more sporty, whereas the T120 is more of that mild-mannered, all-rounder standard bike with a lot of retro personality. But the biggest difference between the two actually comes down to gearing. The T120 has way longer legs than the Speed Twin, which both gives it more of a relaxed personality and helps it cruise much more easily at higher speeds. Now you can alter the gearing of either motorcycle to make it more similar to the other. I think the Speed Twin by default has a 16 tooth in the front and a 42 in the rear, whereas the T120 has a 17 tooth in the front and a 37 in the rear. You could re-gear either of those bikes to anywhere in between that range to make either one ride more like the other. Take a T120 and throw maybe a 1639 sprocket setup on it, and you'd have a much more exciting version of that motorcycle. Dude, oh my god. That is every bit as comfortable as it was before. The Speed Twin, on the other hand, you could stretch that gearing out all the way to 1737, and it's still got kind of a hard seat and a little bit more of an aggressive riding posture. Those are things that would have to be fixed with higher bars, maybe lower foot pegs somehow, and of course a more comfortable seat, which can get expensive. If you're torn between those two motorcycles, it's much easier to make the T120 feel a little bit more like the Speed Twin than it is the other way around. So in your case, that's the one I would go with. So that kind of leads me into this next question, which is asked by two people, Dan and also Conrad. And they're asking if I ever installed a +1 front sprocket on the Speed Twin 1200, going from 16 teeth to 17. As my returning viewers are well aware, I hate riding on the freeway, mostly just because of the intense noise and stress of running my engine at a high RPM for hours and hours on end. Now, I know that that doesn't do any harm to the bike, but I just thought that if I could get those cruising RPMs down, it would extend my fatigue range on long days of freeway riding, and also help with fuel economy a little bit. The most obvious way to go about that is to throw on a +1 front sprocket, which is what I thought I would do. But then somebody pointed out to me the issue of one tooth, one link, where the number of links in the motorcycle's chain is divisible by the number of teeth in the front sprocket, meaning that the same tooth is always contacting the same chain link, which can reduce the life of both the chain and the sprocket. So that kind of scared me off of that and had me sit down to do some math. So what I eventually settled on was a 1639 setup. That's a stock front sprocket and 3 fewer teeth on the rear, which has the equivalent effect on the gear ratio as going up 1 tooth in the front, only without that problem of the ratio of teeth to links. I ended up waiting for my stock chain and sprockets to wear out a little bit further before I made the change. Thank you. But it's on there now, and it had exactly the effect I was hoping for. At freeway speeds, cruising RPM was reduced by about 400 or 450, which makes a huge difference for me, at least mentally. The bike isn't working as hard, it's much less stressed, and therefore, so am I. Now the flip side of that increased cruising ability is in theory a loss of acceleration. But other than maybe needing to feather the clutch just a little bit more when starting from a stop in first gear, I haven't noticed any appreciable loss. Oh, and in case you're wondering, if it did improve the fuel economy, I haven't noticed. Master Kiahi asks if I've had a chance to ride an Indian FTR yet, and if so, how it compares to the Speed Twin. I have ridden an FTR, and I actually put out a 2-minute test ride video on it. They are very different motorcycles, but I do consider them both to be in that sort of big retro twin group, along with the Ducati Scrambler 1100 and the BMW R9T. Between all of those, the FTR is definitely the most modern. It is a thoroughly modern sport bike that just happens to be dressed up in a little bit of a retro suit. Jeez, man. The Indian is much, much faster and more high-tech, but I just find all three of those other bikes to be much more endearing. And for all its modernity, the FTR is still a little bit unrefined and not in a charming way. And I think that's due to the fact that it's Indian's first attempt to add a modern naked sport bike. SJ says, I'm interested in starting to record my rides. What GoPro settings do you use, and what's your video editor of choice? Now, when you asked this question, I was using two different GoPros. I had a 7 that I used on a lot of my trips out west, and a 10 that I had been using for about the past year. But I recently sold both of those and bought a pair of 12s. You're watching those two now. I have an ND filter on the one stuck to my helmet and no filter on the one on my handlebars. And here are the settings that I use for those two cameras. As for editing, I'm a dedicated Premiere Pro man. I know that it's kind of in vogue to ditch Premiere and switch to DaVinci Resolve, but I don't believe the hype. If you don't want to pay for an Adobe subscription, then DaVinci Resolve is probably the way to go, because it's free as long as you're only using 8-bit footage. If your editing needs are super simple, just slapping a few clips together, maybe putting some music on it, then you can't go wrong with iMovie, or even something like CapCut on your cell phone. Alright, last question, and this is a multi-parter from Mellow Jello. We're gonna cut this together rapid fire. Have you ridden the V7 850? No, I have never ridden any Moto Guzzi, but I would really like to, especially the V7. Are you thinking of upgrading the suspension further? Yes, I actually had to get rid of my tech suspension and revert back to the stock rear shocks for reasons I'll explain in an upcoming video. But yeah, I am still interested in investing in some premium shocks for the rear. Probably Öhlins. Have you flashed the ECU yet? Yes, I have. I did that after I upgraded my exhaust. I went to the Akrapovic slip-ons and the Motone X pipe. And the bike, you know, it wasn't running badly, but it wasn't optimal either. And so I sent the ECU off to DNK TuneWorks. Very happy with the results I got from that tune. The bike now runs as it should. Did you ever decide on an aftermarket seat? No, and I don't think I'm going to. And the reason is that all the aftermarket seats I could find, including the Omega Racer that you recommended to me, are not waterproof. And that is just too big of a problem for me. This is my daily commuter, and I ride rain or shine. I can't be carrying around a little cover and putting it on and off every time I have to park the bike if I think there's going to be rain before I get back. The only truly waterproof aftermarket seat that I'm aware of is the one from Corbin, but that is very ugly, and I think it also doesn't fit with my luggage rack that I have on here now. I know there are options where you like unstaple the cover from your factory seat and replace the foam with like some gel stuff that goes in there, but that requires a lot more cutting and fiddling that I'm comfortable with, so I don't think that route is for me. So I think that's all the cues I needed today. Thank you very much to everybody who submitted and everybody who watched. You are always encouraged to leave your questions in the comments, and I'll get back to them as soon as I can, and I may even feature some in future videos like this one. If you want to chat bikes without having it turned into content, you're always welcome to email me. I think that's enough random meandering around the city. I don't even know where the heck I am anymore. I gotta find my way home. So if you've watched this far into the video, then chances are there's one other question that you have, and that's, where did I go? The answer, unfortunately, is not very interesting. I've been right here in my hometown of Washington, D.C. Still alive, still riding, still on the Speed Twin. The difference now is that instead of motorcycling being something that I escape to and go have adventures on, motorcycling is now an everyday utility. My Speed Twin is the only vehicle I own, and it's my primary means of transportation around the city. Don't get me wrong, motorcycling makes for a great commute, but commuting doesn't exactly make for great motorcycling. Does that make sense? I think that's why I lost my motivation to make videos earlier this year. And before you ask why I didn't just move out west permanently, it's because my job, my family, my fiance's job and her family, and almost every single person I care about are all based here in Washington. So here I am, battling through traffic, sweating my ass off 7 months out of the year, and living 2 hours away from the nearest half-decent mountain pass. I was really enjoying being a member at Dunn Lewis Motorcycle Club, but sadly a few months ago they had to close. But it's not all doom and gloom. I'm getting married, I have a cat now, yada yada yada, and I've been getting the occasional side gig as a videographer. I've learned a lot in a short time, and I hope that my new skills and gear will be evident in my upcoming videos. Yes, I said upcoming videos. Over the past couple months, I've actually managed to prioritize riding for fun, and in the process, got a couple of vanblamm videos in the bag. You've got bike mods, multiple moto camping trips, and even a few fun things here in town to look forward to. That said, my uploads will be slow. Always have been, always will be. I do not compromise on my edits, and I've always appreciated how understanding you guys are of the time that takes. While you wait for my next videos to roll in, I highly recommend checking out two of my favorite off-the-beaten-path motorcycle YouTube channels, Moto Scout and Wander ADV. Watching those guys kept me motivated to make this comeback, no matter how long that would take. Something that I do not recommend checking out is my Instagram. I stopped using it when I stopped posting videos because I was only ever on there to try to drive traffic to YouTube, and I found that not using Instagram feels fantastic. That app was a thief of joy at the best of times, and now that it's just a half-baked TikTok ripoff, it's downright painful to use. I may still check my DMs every once in a while, but don't expect me to have much of a presence on there moving forward, even with new videos coming out. The best way to contact me has always been via email. Well, it looks like I didn't finish writing the script for this video, so if it was too boring for me to finish writing, it's probably too boring for you to finish watching. I'm gonna get out of here before it's totally dark, but it feels good to be doing this. I'm excited to see my van fam again and share some more motorcycle adventures. Anyway, until next time, you all ride safe, and remember, motorcycles are for everyone.